Good afternoon and welcome to our South by Southwest panel. I'm Annabelle Cellini, Chief Strategy Officer at ASA, and in a second our panelists are going to introduce themselves as I ask them their first question. But to introduce our topic this afternoon, we are going to be talking about the fact that college is not necessarily the right option for every student. And I think one of the things that we've seen at American Student Assistance as a student loan guarantor is a large number of people, young people, defaulting to college, arriving at college, finding that they have not really thought clearly about their pathway, dropping out and finding themselves in a tremendous amount of student loan debt and with no degree. And so one of the things as a nonprofit that we have been exploring is how might we help people on that exploration journey? How might we help them start earlier, experiment, have access to all sorts of career options and pathways so that as they make that post-secondary transition, they're doing it from a position of having an informed opinion and choice about what their future aspirations and goals are. And so we've pulled together this group of thought leaders, all of whom in their own way are thinking about innovating those pathways and helping us as we think through how best to advise young people at this absolutely critical decision, understand what their options are and how to make those really good choices. And I think now more than ever, in the midst still of a pandemic, that choice set has evolved considerably. Decision-making criteria has evolved considerably. And so have the young people who are making now very different decisions about their pathways. And so, Ryan, if you could take a sec to introduce yourself and then help us understand, we are seeing fast for completion declining. We are seeing some institutions seeing massive gains in enrollment, but there's evidence to suggest that young people are not choosing to go to college.
Yeah, particularly the young people who need it most, which is to say young people from lower income and disadvantaged backgrounds. I'm Ryan Craig. I'm an investor. I run a firm called Achieve Partners. I also write books primarily about Anand Agrawal and Michael Horn, but secondarily about the future of higher education. My last book, you can see it over my shoulder, subtitle is Faster and Cheaper Alternatives to College, postulating that we are moving from a world where everyone consumes post-secondary education sort of in an all-you-can-eat in one sitting model, moving to a lifelong learning model where students consume what they need when they need it. And of course, traditional colleges and universities have always paid lip service to the idea of lifelong learning. With the view that lifelong learning, what it meant to them was after students got a degree, then they'd come back and buy more. And of course, that's not the way it's going to work. What's going to work is students are going to pursue pathways that will get them to their desired goal, which predominantly is a good first job. That's really what we've seen. That's the sea change we've seen over the last 20, 25 years in higher education. Young people now are more focused on that than ever, and they recognize that a degree is increasingly not enough for that. So when you add to that the friction around affordability, student loan debt, and now COVID, it should be no surprise that we're seeing a decline in enrollment.
Yeah, thank you. And Michael, you wrote the book on choosing college, and so we're seeing young people not choosing college, but as Ryan says, disproportionately, Black kids, Hispanic kids are not choosing college. And how do we ensure equity and support in this sort of transition and decision making, which is so important, regardless of the pathway? But perhaps you can speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And delighted to be with you, you all today in this esteemed company. And just to quickly introduce myself, I'm a senior strategist currently at Guild Education, which helps America's frontline workers advance in their education and upskilling. And as you mentioned, an author, Choosing College being my latest book, and perhaps we should have called it choosing college or not in parentheses or something like that. But look, I think in some ways COVID has broken our molds for the fact that we don't all have to just be on the train, and that there's only one way to get onto life's course of prosperity and becoming a great citizen and so forth. At the same time, as you noted, it's disproportionately impacted people from low-income backgrounds, Black, Hispanic youth, which has some significant challenges, because if those students from those backgrounds complete, we know that the impact is significantly actually more important for their livelihoods than people who come from relatively well-off circumstances. From my perspective, I think it's three things we need to be doing right now. One is the advising and narrative telling in K-12 schools themselves. So we need to be giving support to all students to help them see the full range of options and help them not think that they all have to do the same thing, but that they have to find the right path that actually will put them on a train, if you will, to a productive future. And that might or might not be college. It might or might not be college for white students from upper income backgrounds either. We need to change that perception across the board, I would argue, but we need to make sure that we're putting the affordable options in front of Black and brown students, particularly those from low income backgrounds, so that they can see the full set of options. The second thing I think we need to do is think much more seriously about alternative experiences, being able to stack into a degree and actually count for college experience, rather than force people to make this sort of arbitrary trade-off of, I'm taking the non-college route, I'm taking the college path. That seems to me a false choice that we have sold ourselves, and short-term credentials ought to be able to be recognized and absorbed into degrees over time. And then the third piece I would say is we need a much more robust set of policies and programs around competency-based learning or prior learning assessment or direct assessment that can say, hey, you actually got skills in the workforce or other places. Let us look and be able to assess those knowledge and skills and count them for credit into degree programs, or frankly, short-term certificate programs themselves, to really level the playing field and create a lot more affordable options.
Fantastic. And what a wonderful setup for our next panelist. Anand, so we met ASA is very proud to support some of your work at edX, specifically around the microbachelors, precisely because we see opportunities for creating alternatives, and particularly alternatives that stack towards a credential, so that we're not making an either or choice. We talk a lot about permeable pathways. So we're excited to support microbachelors. It would be wonderful if you could tell us a little bit about what a microbachelor is and kind of what sort of uptake you're getting from high school students, or even perhaps some of these students that have chosen not to apply to college, but maybe are seeing this as a viable alternative option.
First of all, thank you for having me. At edX, we're just so proud of our partnership with ASA and all the collaboration that we've had these past few months. Very quickly, my name is Anand Agarwal. I am the founder and CEO of edX and also a professor at MIT. edX is one of the world's leading edtech platforms where some of the top universities in the world and companies offer their courses on the platform, and programs like microbachelors. And over 37 million learners from every single country in the world are coming and learning on edX. And when they learn, they can also get credentials, and all of this happens completely online. And so both Ryan and Michael, you've just pitched a really, I guess you call it a softball in baseball to me. It just teed up our solution so beautifully. Microbachelors are a new program concept that edX has introduced. It's a credential called microbachelors. It is both modular and stackable to a degree, no application, very low cost. So what is the microbachelors? So traditionally, you would go to college on campus, spend 4 years there at the age of 18 or something, and hopefully graduate. But today, the world is in a different place where people are looking to learn continuously throughout life. So with microbachelors, you can take a microbachelors program on edX. It's a module of learning. And so, for example, we have a microbachelors from New York University in Foundations of Computer Science. It's 3 courses. You complete it. You get a certificate, say, look, I have a certificate from NYU. It's a microbachelor certificate. You can put that on your resume, and you have earned some skills. You can go get a job. It's a modular learning. You can go help yourself get a job. At the same time, when you complete the microbachelors, you also earn credit on a university transcript through a partnership with Thomas Edison State University. They get 3 credits for the program on a university transcript. Completely, we take care of all of the prior learning stuff. We take care of all the plumbing and the financials. The credit appears on a transcript. And so the beauty of that is this modular program is such that when the credit appears, you can continue taking microbachelors on edX at your own pace. You can be working and taking it, and credit keeps accumulating, like as if you're putting money into a bank account. And one fine day, when you have enough credits, you can graduate with a bachelor's degree very affordably. The microbachelors on edX are about $170 per credit, which is pennies on the dollar compared to the similar cost at private colleges and others. So the microbachelors is this new concept that is modular, stackable, and there's no admissions. You can, with one click, you can start learning and be earning both skills as well as academic credit towards a degree.
Thank you. Now, I recognize I probably put my foot in it because I've described some of these models as alternative, and our CEO recently published a blog post in which she declared that we should not be referring to these as alternative credentials. But in this universe of pathways that are not college but lead to family sustaining careers, we're seeing several promising models, microbachelors being one, bootcamps being another. And Ryan, we're working with you in that space. Is it fair to sort of lump all of these things together as an alternative? What do we call this space, and how should we speak about it?
No, it's a fair point. I mean, alternative is a bit of a pejorative term, unfortunately. And when the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times does a story on quote unquote college alternatives, you can bet dollars to donuts that they're going to have a profile of someone who became a welder or an electrician. And the problem with that is that while most American families would agree that you can earn a good living in the traditional building and construction trades, most American families would also say, that's for someone else's child, not for my child. I don't want my child to work with their hands. And so that's why actually in the appendix of this book that I published 2 years ago, I intentionally omitted those sort of older trade pathways with the view to looking at the new pathways that were leading to good jobs in tech and healthcare and financial services and fintech and biotech that current college graduates are having a hard time getting because they just simply don't have the specific skills that employers are seeking. And I think that's really the important point. College is not doing a worse job than it was 20, 30 years ago. It's gotten a lot more expensive. So in that respect, it's worse. But in terms of the actual education they're providing, I think they're doing a credible job. The vast majority of schools do an excellent job of preparing students with the cognitive skills, critical thinking skills, executive function skills, problem solving skills that they need to be successful. The problem is that entry-level jobs at most employers have kind of skyrocketed away from where we were 20, 25 years ago, where a degree was the signal that most employers looked for to demonstrate that someone could learn the job. That's no longer sufficient. Most employers want someone to actually be productive on day one and are littering their job postings with a whole series of skill requirements that turn what were once entry-level jobs into jobs requiring 2-3 years of experience. So that is the problem, and colleges and universities just simply don't really have the capability or interest in incorporating, for example, Salesforce training or Epic training, the electronic medical records platform, into their courses and academic programs. So that's the problem. So, the pathways that we're talking about are, the term I use is last mile training. In my book, I essentially set the stage for this emerging last mile training landscape, but omitted the punchline. And so now you don't need to buy the book because you know the punchline. The punchline is that the last mile training programs that will scale fastest and furthest are those that reduce or eliminate friction, not only for candidates, but also for employers. And so those models are what we call apprenticeship models, where you're essentially, the candidate is paid from day one and guaranteed a job. And on the other end, you're reducing friction for the employer because the provider serves as the employer of record for a period of time, allowing the ultimate employer to try the talent before they buy the talent. So those are the platforms that achieve. We are investing and we are building new apprenticeship programs into scaled service businesses across a wide range of tech and healthcare companies.
That's terrific. Thank you. And I think, one of the observations that we've had is there are so many exciting and interesting and fruitful, productive career pathways that folks can pursue, that actually one of the major barriers to pursuing them is sort of lack of information of how to sort of navigate and assess and choose what those options are. We recognize certainly in the high school space, college counselors were under duress before COVID. Our prediction is it's going to be an even tougher situation further down the path as schools and kids come back or not into high school. And so this notion that counselors are going to be able to help kids as much as they want to make some of these decisions about what pathway and options to pursue, and particularly as more exciting ones come online, quite literally. Michael, I have a question for you. How best to help young people assess, navigate, and make decisions about those post-secondary transitions? Are you seeing anything exciting in that space?
I mean, I think the answer is yes, but the incentives are really poorly aligned to do what we know needs to be done to make this a push. And what I would say is to just ask guidance counselors to sort of be their own last mile shop, if you will, of trying to inform people of all the different options that are out there and all the paths that they might have pursued to see if there's a passion there or something that sticks for them. As you said, it's unrealistic. There's a huge explosion of opportunities and programs out there. I think much like I think colleges need to stop thinking about the career services office as the way that you get in the workforce and integrate a lot of that work with employers much earlier in the coursework itself. I think high schools and middle schools even have to do something similar. And so, I know you all partner, for example, with Cajon Union School District in California that provides a lot of these opportunities for students to basically start to prototype and learn what is it like to be any number of 50 plus different career pathways and occupations, and start to understand the knowledge and skills and projects and things that you would be doing to start to build a sense of, I like this, I don't like that. And it's not to pigeonhole themselves in one field or even a couple fields, but to start to understand, what are the things that I like to do? What brings me energy? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are the things I want to stay away from? So that you can start to identify then other mentors and people out there that can start to illuminate the path for you. And so, a big piece of this, I think, is expanding individual social capital much earlier in the pipeline so that it's not accidental of who that opens up the different pathways. I like to seriously joke that I grew up inside the Beltway in Washington, D.C. I literally did not know what an engineer was until like junior or senior year of college, because I had never met one. In Washington, D.C., we have lots of different things. We have lawyers, we have doctors, we have other strange alien life forms that serve as
politicians. Don't forget
exactly
politicians.
That's the strange alien life form. And so I'd never been exposed to it. So I didn't even know that, despite liking science and technology, that this was a possible pathway until literally, third or fourth year of college, when we've closed doors at that point in many cases. And so it's illuminating so that it's not an accident that you find these pathways, but that at least you've been curated and had a chance to connect and network with people to see through them. And frankly, online content is part of that, but also the direct connections and to illuminate these pathways through actual individuals is critical.
Yeah, no, we'd agree with that. And as you say, very keen to help young people understand their sort of interests and passions early on. So, understanding what lights them up. I think, a dimension that we've thought about is, in addition to what I love to do, what I'm good at, there is also the question of what the world needs. And so therefore, what are employers asking for, and how do we make sure and align that, young people are choosing to go in pathways that are connected to sort of employer need and demand, which is your point, Ryan. I guess my question though for Anant is, what sort of uptake or recognition are you seeing with employers, for example, with some of the non-college credentials that you are putting out in the marketplace? And how, is there an opportunity now to expand acceptance of these credentials as really viable pathways that employers?
Annabelle, you fell into the trap yourself. You called them non-college credentials, and I think I think a challenge that all of us face here as we try to innovate is that there are terms that are simply not true, right? Microbachelors is an example. It is a college credential. It is college level work. It is taught by some of the top colleges in the world, like NYU and SNHU and ASU and WGU and others, or they're called alternative pathways, when really we should be calling them the new normal. I think these are the new normal, and frankly, there's the old way, which is you go down the traditional path. And so I think we have to think about culturally how we think about these things. And I think in terms of acceptance, whether employers or in high schools and so on, I don't think a lot of high school counselors and guidance counselors know about these. And so they've been to college, and I advise my kids, if I was a counselor, hey, go to college, and it's all the usual stuff. And then with employers, no HR person got fired for requiring a bachelor's degree in a job posting. I mean, this is, someone might go and copy one posting, edit it, and put it up, and it has a bachelor's degree. So I think a system, unfortunately, is geared to promulgate the past, and that's a challenge. But with microbachelors, I think we're seeing a very rapid uptake with individuals. We have 200,000 since we launched these about a year ago. We've had 200,000 students, learners enrolled in microbachelors programs. At the high school level, I would say a few hundred, and not a whole lot yet. It's much more visible among people that are in the gig economy and others who want to reskill and upskill, or who've been laid off and things like that. But just a few hundred high schoolers at this point. Employers are also very interested. Microbachelors programs are funded by employers like Boeing and Walmart, SunTrust. These have all funded those programs because they have entry-level workers that may have a high school diploma but don't have any college-level work. And so they're looking for people to be working. So let's say, for example, I am working in the gig economy. I'm a courier for Postmates, for example. Or if I am a frontline worker at Walmart manning a cashier somewhere, they're looking to upskill and provide promotion pads for their employees. And they're very interested in that. And in fact, of the microbachelors learners on edX, 91% of them who've earned these credentials are telling us that they've had a career advancement as a result of it. We also work with organizations like yourselves, ASA, organizations like Urban Alliance in DC and Detroit, where we have a small pilot going on with them, where nine people from their organization who largely Black, that have only a college diploma, a high school diploma, never went to college. Well, pilot where the 9 learners are now going through microbachelors programs on edX through a partnership with Urban Alliance. So I think right now these are very grassroots fledgling efforts, but my hope is that over time we can get much broader acceptability from guidance counselors and employers, because certainly the people are talking. We have 200,000 learners who have come to edX to take these programs.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ryan, similar question to you really about sort of role of employer and how much they are a driver of this innovation.
Look, it's huge. Employers are already driving this change with their changes in job descriptions. And I just read a piece last week about how if you think about how intelligible degrees are to employers, in the different stages of the hiring funnel, from the top of the funnel through to the bottom of the funnel. They're not particularly intelligible. They're just well known.
Right.
So as employers increasingly move to skill requirements in job descriptions, skill-based credentials that can be made more intelligible, not just to human hiring managers mid-funnel and at the bottom of the hiring funnel, but specifically to HRIS systems and applicant tracking systems at the top of the hiring funnel. That's what we're going to see. We're going to see apps built on digital credentials that are making those credentials clear to employer systems at the top of the hiring funnel. You're going to see many more candidates with these new credentials making it through to the humans who'll then say, what are they? interesting credential. Let's take a look at this candidate. And if employers are right in that these jobs really do require sets of skills, then presumably you'll see some positive feedback loops where the candidates who actually have these skill-based credentials are hired for these jobs, perform well in the jobs, and you'll loop back and they'll continue to reinforce the job descriptions and the hiring patterns of employers. So, the reason everyone thinks they need a degree to succeed is because for the past 50 years, that's been the case. But the change that we're going to see is a change born initially by skill requirements in job descriptions, and then the emergence of these skill-based credentials in response.
Thank you. And so I'm sort of, in conclusion, going to sort of bring this back to where we started, which is sort of understanding, where our rising juniors and seniors are right now in their decision-making process. And when I talked to you all last summer, we had a lively debate around the advice that you would give to somebody in that age group right now. Michael, we talked a bit at that time about gap years, and I have to say, I'm not sure I thought we'd still be sitting here talking about whether or not September 22 was still, or August 22 was still a question. I'm going to ask you the question again. What advice would you give to a young person considering their post-secondary transition options right now?
Yeah, well, so I would still say, don't feel like you have to go on the beaten path, like look for the right path for you. And I think a gap year, I'll say it this way. A lot of parents of juniors last year were saying to me, I'm so worried about when my kid is a senior and they're applying because the pool is going to be so much bigger because so many more people have taken a gap year and now they're going to be coming into the class and it's going to be that much more competitive. And my response was always twofold. One, frankly, a lot of colleges are going to need to admit more people into their freshman class to make up for the fact that they have smaller sophomore classes in effect. But secondly, I hope it creates a trend where people look more seriously at gap years and so that they can build a deeper sense of who they are and how they can contribute, what employers want, and so forth. And that gap year is not backpacking around Europe. That could be a small part of it, but I would encourage people to be taking online courses, take a microbachelor sequence, jump into a boot camp, get some actual skills, take some internships and externships and actual jobs and apprenticeships, get into a variety of experiences to build your sense of what it's going to look like and figure out what is the right path for you so that we can break these mindsets and you can build actual skills themselves. That to me is the biggest piece, is like learn who you are and invest in yourself in this year. And I think a lot of individuals ought to take that advice.
I think that's wonderful advice. I think one of the things I'm experimenting with funding a little bit of 13th year work, actually with a very similar idea, because from an equity perspective, we want to make sure that that opportunity is available to all kids. And we talked about equity a little bit, and I think by sort of expanding what's possible in our current K-12 system, anyway, we'll see what happens. It's an experiment right now.
I gotta just add to that. I completely agree with you. The Biden administration is wholly focused on the 1,000 community colleges out there and using those colleges more effectively as pathways to four-year degrees and economic success. But there are 25,000 high schools out there, and those high schools are mostly empty in the evenings and on the weekends. And so I predict over the next 5 years, you're going to see lots of new programs at high schools that are sort of dual enrollment programs providing pathways to direct pathways to faster and cheaper alternatives to college, and some directly to jobs. And it's directly in response to the crisis of college affordability and the crisis of college employability.
Well, and frankly, education savings accounts and lifelong learning accounts that are being discussed as ways to create more fundable ways for students to go to college, throughout their lives, like those could be sources also in the long run. And I think we're seeing a lot of states move in that direction right now because so many more people are exercising choice.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Where I think we shouldn't think of a gap year as as separate, high school year as separate, college as separate. Think of them as mushing together. Imagine while you're in high school and getting your high school work done, take an online program like a microbachelor's and stack some college credit under your belt. As an example, the MIT admissions application form asks you what edX courses you've taken and what certificates you've achieved through MIT. So college is also looking to your credentials as helping in the applications process. Similarly, when I advise people who call me and say, hey, look, I'm taking a gap year, what do you think? I'm a university professor. And so my advice to them is simple. Sure, take a gap year, spend some time going around the world, but use that time to not only travel the world, but also do some online courses and get a leg up on college. And the beauty of things like microbachelors is that it's not just for fun that you're doing it. You can actually accumulate credit on a college transcript while you're doing it and get a leg up on college at the same time.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for joining us. I'm sorry not to be able to kind of like hobnob with you around the exhibit halls at South by Southwest. I hope we will be back in Austin in the not too distant future, but thank you all very much for joining us, and be safe.
Thank you, Annabelle, Ryan, and Michael. Great to chat with you.
Good to see you.
Likewise.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.